Welcome to our conversation with Asia Daashuur. Asia's been a part of our, I was going to say so many things about Asia. She's been a part of our community since the beginning as a teacher, a keynote at the Confluence. She's now on our inclusion committee. And yeah, all the ways that we're going to collaborate in the future, which will be revealed at some point.
Yes.
So welcome, Asia. Thank you for being here for this conversation. I'm excited to chat.
I'm excited too. Thank you for having me. Obviously, very excited.
Would you mind sharing a little bit about you and what you do in the world?
Absolutely. I'm Asia, or a lot of people know me as the Spirit Guide Coach. I basically am a spiritual advisor, and I focus on therapeutic ways to move forward through connection to an individual's unique spiritual team. And I'm also the founder of Spirit House Collective, which is a metaphysical collective of magic where we introduce our community to new teachings, practitioners, and just ways of connection, and which ultimately lead to individuals just learning more about themselves and who they are and where they wish to go.
Love it. Such a fan of the Spirit House Collective as well. Um, so, we've been kind of talking. Our communities, I feel like, are very similar in a lot of ways. And we talk a lot about magic. And I would love to just start off by asking you what you believe magic is.
Oh, wow. What a great question. Honestly, what I heard one of my guides just say is that, we are magic. We are magic. And I think in the course of our lives, through a series of events, we forget that day by day. We forget more and more how magical we are. And I believe when people have their spiritual awakenings, it basically comes down to an awakening and a remembering of how magical we each are and what that magic can really bring out in ourselves, our communities, and the world in general.
Absolutely. And when did can you share a little bit about your spiritual unfolding? Like, when did you start to realize you were a sacred, magical being?
It took a long time. I would say that, in terms of connecting to spirit or connecting, to the dead, that happened at a very young age. But again, through life, I just had honestly forgot those memories until I was in my 30s. And after a long time of just, navigating depression and anxiety and feeling really alone, I decided to look into how I could reconnect to myself. And through that reconnection, a lot of memories from my past came up, and the seeker and explorer spirit basically was reignited within me. And through that, I ultimately began my connection to my own spirit guides, to my spirituality in general, and desire to live a life of fulfillment versus a life of obligation, or trying to do things that basically fit into a mold that I never made myself.
Not an easy path to walk.
No, but it's not. It's a very difficult path to walk, but I think the rewards are unlimited, and I believe that the more honest we are with ourselves and what our needs and desires are, I think the more of a productive, I don't want to say productive, the more of a the better of a community and world that we can create. If we're all doing things that inspire us, that connect us, that feel honest and true to our heart and souls, we're going to create better ways of living and engaging with the world in general. And that's going to create a better society. I wish, and obviously for some of us, it's a privilege to do that. And for those of us who don't have that privilege to basically do the work that you're inspired to do, I believe that there are ways to connect to that freedom, that spirit, that passion throughout the day, whether you're working as, an accountant, or, working as a full-time witch, or, psychic, or whatever it is.
Absolutely. Cool. Yeah. So how do you feel about the word witch? Like, is that something that you self-identify as? And what do you think it means?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, if someone has said, hey, well, you're very witchy or you're a witch, I see that as a compliment, where I have to say that it used to scare me. Like I used to feel like if someone said that I was being called out for being weird or other, which is hilarious because I feel like being weird and other is like the best thing in the world. And I believe we're all weird and other. I just believe also that we're trained to hide that and to suppress it. And I believe like being a witch is really about the uncovering, the undoing of the ways in which society has taught you to be versus your authentic self. And the more authentic or the more in line with your truth you are, I believe the more witchy you ultimately become, no matter, like, again, being a witch, I feel is genderless. It's not about that. I think being a witch is being connected to the universe, to the earth, to the land we live on, and to, again, to our truth. Because it takes bravery, I believe, and it takes a lot of hard work to dive into that witch mentality of surrender, surrender, and I would say a surrender and deep diving into the recesses and corners of your soul, right?
Yeah.
And realizing how connected that is to the world we live in, you know, to the seasons, to the animals, to plants, like all that's involved. Like I feel like the deeper you dive into yourself, the more you realize how connected you are to the world, the more appreciation and reverence you have for the world, and the greater impact I feel that you can have on yourself and those around you. Again, I feel like it's all interconnected. I think that that's what being a witch is really about, realizing how interconnected we are, how powerful we all are, and the ability to create change within and without.
Yes. Yes. I appreciate too the way you spoke about the witch and being other and or being weird, because I think they're definitely connected. I feel like the witch as an archetype was like
Oh,
the person on the outskirts, like
yes.
with the magical potion that, you know, cured your rash or something, you
Yes.
know?
Yes. How weird. They used a poultice to cure my eczema, you know, or and obviously, you know, like there's such a stigma attached to that. I mean, when I remember I was working my last like job that wasn't, you know, my own business or working for myself. And I remember a 6-year-old kid came in for her mother. I was working retail. And I remember she was this very, like, obviously magical and witchy child. And she turned around to me and just pointed and said, "You're a witch. You are a witch." And I remember, like, if I could have, my whole face would have flushed red. I felt this like shame, like she had
Mm.
found me out. And then I had to look at that. I was like, wow, this 6-year-old child saw me, got excited about it, and proclaimed who I was. Yet, me as an adult, I felt this inclination to hide and to fade into the background because of what I felt that title entailed, what it was connected to. And it was actually after, and then after that exchange, I remember if I would go to a party or meet up with friends and other people, if someone, and I think I've talked about this with you before, if someone asked me what I did, where normally I would kind of like say, oh, you know, I do some coaching, and you know, we have some circles, you know, wellness. I started saying I talk to dead people. You know, I just wanted to be as blunt as possible, so there was no room for me to hide from myself. And I credit that mini witch with helping me come out of the spiritual and witchy closet.
Beautiful. Something about yeah, children like not being socialized to the extent that we are. It's
Yes.
helpful sometimes,
Yes.
like
Yes.
pierces through that.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, totally.
I love that story. I think we've been kind of like circling around this and talking directly to it, but I mean, how would you define a modern witch, or do you think there's like a different distinction there?
I don't think so. I think, you know, a modern witch, again, this is a very broad term. You know, this is very broad thoughts on the word of witch. I think we can get into, they're all different types of witches, right? There are psychic witches. I mean, we're all psychic, but they're psychic witches. They're plant witches. They're, you know, uh, alchemist witches. I think they're all different types of witches, but I think the modern witches really embraces, again, just being who they are unapologetically, know that who they are is going to shift and change, knowing that, their desire is to be connected as possible to the world they live in, to not shy away from the difficult, to not hide from what seems to be perceived as unacceptable or not fitting the norm. I believe the modern witch is someone who proudly says, this is who I am and I'm still figuring shit out. I make no apologies and I just want to move forward, and I want to learn from those around me. I want to continue to evolve versus devolve or simply stay the same. And I believe throughout history, witches have always been, individuals who sought more than what was given to them or allowed to them or placed in front of them. And I think that continues on even now.
Yes. I mean, how is your personal lineage or personal history kind of shaped the way that you practice your magic and your spiritual?
I mean, I think in terms of, are we talking about, when we're talking about lineage, it's a little bit difficult because on my mother's side, my mother's German and French. And I know that in the history of my mother's side, there were a lot of women who practiced their connection to plants and herbal remedies, my mother included. But it's not something that we ever really went into depth with, or I didn't as a child. When it comes to my dad's side, my dad, because of the slave trade, there's so much in there, but I have a lot of ancestry in the Congo, as well as Louisiana. So there is a rich history there of hoodoo and voodoo that basically then evolved into different branches of the family being very connected to Catholicism or Christianity, washing away a lot of the practices. But I do know, and my dad and family members don't really wish to discuss it. Like when some of them realized what I was doing, it was very not cool, not accepted. They haven't said that to me specifically, but I've heard it through the grapevine. And one of the only things and I'm actually planning a trip to New Orleans to begin to do some more digging, but one of the only memories that my dad has even told me, which he let slip out, is that, people would walk by his house, where he lived with my grandmother and my other aunts and uncles, and they would throw things at the house or yell at the house, the voodoo priestess lives there, and that was a source of shame, which is interesting because I know that my grandmother was a devout Christian. So I don't really know the depths of that, and my dad won't tell me anything else. And I think there's a lot of secrecy and shame within the colonization and whitewashing and erosion of our history, that it wasn't acceptable to basically connect to certain practices or spirituality. It had to be cloaked in, again, Christianity or Catholicism. So unfortunately, I have only bits and pieces of that part of my heritage, but it is my plan to do as much of a deep dive as possible and connect the dots as best I can. My spirituality has come from simply, diving right into whatever it is that I felt connected to, discussing things with my guides, hearing how it was related to my familial line, doing the ancestral work in terms of where do I come from, where are my roots, and then looking at the history of those places as well. And if I felt a pull towards something, then I chased it, then I walked towards it. If it didn't resonate, then I let it be.
Yeah, that's such a difficult path to walk, and I wish you all the best with that. Sounds like it's going to be an exciting journey.
I think so. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
Fun and illuminating, and probably a lot of grief and pain, but that's a spiritual path, right?
Totally. All of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You have to have all of it.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I saw when you were talking, I saw one of those rows of Jerichos blossoming all over your face.
Oh, and I have quite a few rows of Jerichos around here too. Yeah, and I use rows of Jericho. Actually, I know we were talking about rituals before, and it's always when someone asks you, you're always like, "What do I do?" But I just remembered that my practice, actually, I have a rose of Jericho, one that represents my business, one that represents my my home and my family. And I monitor them every week to give them, what they need in terms of water and clearing and cleansing and energy, so that they keep thriving alongside what I wish to thrive.
Beautiful. So so you have those kind of historical and family lineages, and you're sort of working through this work intuitively because you are a psychic intuitive medium. Um, is there anything that you would maybe like any advice you could give to someone who is walking this path, a similar path, or just kind of seeking those answers that we all crave as witches on our path? Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Trust yourself. The more you trust yourself, the more you will receive. The more doubt you accept, the less clarity you'll receive, and you know, the less connection that will be there. We're all super connected, but the more that we doubt ourselves, the less that we're able to actually uh, the less that we're able to actually be aware of what the universe, our guides, our ancestors are offering us, right? And look, that's gonna, you know, come in again cycles, right? There are times where I trust myself, you know, completely, and other times where I have doubt. But remembering that the spiritual path is all about the path to self, and that if you trust yourself, what you're feeling, what your body's telling you, what you're hearing, what you're experiencing, that's always going to lead you in the right direction. The more that we begin to cover over our own instincts, our own intuition, our own, you know, push and pull, the more difficult it becomes to differentiate between what is real in terms of like your own heart and what's been basically placed on you by others, right? And I feel like that's why people come to the spiritual path anyway, to really figure out who they are and where they're going. Yet they get caught up in the cycles of like, is this enough? Is this my imagination? Is this real? What are other people doing? You know, what are other people seeing or experiencing? And all of that, in my opinion, is just garbage. It's just white noise. Trust what you're experiencing. Know that your experience is going to be unique. And if you can do that every day, work towards that, you know, you'll never be disappointed, or at least completely disappointed. It's always going to be like a changing, multi-layered landscape.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice. Yeah. When we compare ourselves, especially with psychic work, if you're comparing yourself, like how another person experiences spirit, it feels silly. Like once you are able to just realize that each of us have our own connection, and it's not going to look like another person's connection, you know?
And I can see people, like when we had like in-person workshops, I can see it and even on Zoom I can see and feel it happening. Like someone's like, oh my gosh, you know, I just saw my great grandfather and he was wearing this like red suit and there were like birds flying behind him, and I can feel people being like, oh no, I shouldn't be here. I did not have that experience. And I want to say, like, that is one person. You know, you could have experienced, you know, amazing colors or smelled like cherry blossoms. Like, all of those are valid. Just because someone is having like an insane experience that's incredibly visual, that doesn't take away from what you're experiencing. Or if you didn't experience anything at all, it doesn't mean the next time you won't. You know, these are progressions. And as I'm sure you know, like, all of this takes practice. That's why it's called spiritual practice. You know, sometimes I like try to connect and it's just like crickets, and I'm like, okay, well, gave it a shot. I'll come back a little bit later. It's like you're getting like a busy signal or something. Like, I guess they're out.
I love that. It's like a busy signal. I definitely had that experience. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Not now.
Yeah, not now. Well, I'll come back when you're home.
Yeah, exactly. Ring the doorbell.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you, you know, I guess you have all these names. So how do you identify as a magical being? Like, what are some of your...
I mean, I think medium and spiritual advisor. I mean, I do, you know, talk to dead people all the time, but some people definitely will say like, hey, I want to talk to my great aunt that just, you know, passed away. And I'm definitely the type of mystic that's like, I can ring the doorbell, but that doesn't guarantee someone's going to come to the door. You know, I'm amazed at people that are always like, oh, I can reach out to anyone at any time. Because to me, I'm like, well, we don't, you know, like, they might be busy. They have other things to do. You know, some of these, and also some individuals are no longer on the other side. They've already started another existence on this planet. So really, the spiritual advisor, receiving the counsel of your spirit guides, is what my main focus is. Other people come in during the work, and I pass on those messages, but I really want people to know that that the work can be very therapeutic. I mean, I have people that I see every week, every month. And the whole point is to, again, work on trust, to hear what your spirit guides have to say, and to allow that counsel to influence you in a positive way, to make choices based on what you want and what you desire and what you wish to work through, versus, you know, I don't know, like the whole guru mentality, or, you know, where someone is just feels like they're handing you a list of, like, a to-do list of how your life can be better. That just seems very far-fetched and not realistic to the way I believe the universe works.
Totally. Or how people learn and
Yeah.
grow.
Yeah. Or, like, you know, I often will get people, I mean, I for the most part I don't, but people that will come into a session and say, well, I want to know, like, what my life's purpose is. And, you know, spirit guides are always just like, where is this whole thing coming from that, like, we only have just one purpose? Like, you know, we have purposes throughout the day. And the purposes of life is to figure that shit out, right? Like, what's my purpose today? What do I want to embody today? What do I want to connect with today? And how is that going to affect, you know, your larger purposes in life, right? Like, whether it's starting a family, or, you know, traveling the world, or it could be, you know, creating a new, a revived and healed connection with your mother, right? You know, so, and I just believe that spirituality overall is changing a lot, and people are becoming more accepting of it, and really seeing that it can be a valuable therapeutic tool, versus, like, just, you know, and no offense to them, but, like, going to some psychic once a year and asking, like, when you're going to meet your soulmate. Like, that's not interesting to me.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, I know you do.
I'm, you know, we talked a little bit about this before, but, you know, is there, you have a lot of resources. You've given a lot of resources, like, on your pages and in Patreon and everything. But I will ask if there is kind of like an embodied practice or simple ritual and an action you take that can, like, support other people who are just looking for a little groundedness or connection with spirit.
I'm just going through what I do. I mean, I think the things that I would normally say are things that I'm sure people have found, whether it's like morning pages or pulling cards every day. But I think some of those little things that I do that are maybe outside of that are, you know, every morning I wake up and I call my energy back into my body, because, you know, I've obviously been traveling. There are things that have been going on. So I make a point to call my energy back into my body so that I can start from a place of, you know, being 100%, you know, fully myself. Throughout the day, no matter what, like after clients, I make sure I spend, you know, 10 to 15 minutes in the sun, just receiving that vitamin D and that light and that connection. And because it clears, it grounds, it allows you to focus on your breath. So I make sure that happens. That's just something small. And that's like a little mini sun worship, which I think works really, really well. And then also at the start of the day, I plant roots from the bottom of my feet deep into the earth. I want to be as grounded as possible. I don't want to disassociate. I want to allow myself to experience life, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and also acknowledge that the more grounded I am, the more present I can be. Like, I've been having moments recently where I'll just look at my dog and just stare at her and, like, wow, you're really beautiful. Or I'll look at a plant and I just, you know, in the sun hitting it, wow, how gorgeous is that? Like, those little moments of remembering, I think, is also one of the foundational pieces of being a witch or being a spiritual person, noticing the beauty in the now. And I think those are the things that I would tell people to begin to connecting to more, because then synchronicity begins to speed up, and then you begin to feel more in flow, and then you don't no longer feel as much resistance to what is calling you ultimately, just with those small few steps.
I love all of those things. Very helpful. I think it's something we often forget, especially like just being a modern human and having to deal with so much day to day. But, you know, when we're on our spiritual path and we're like looking ahead and like trying to achieve something or develop a skill, like really just being present is kind of the direct bridge to that. So that's
Yeah,
super
it's
helpful.
harder to do that, right? Like,
Yeah.
even if I have to set reminders in my phone, I used to, not anymore. I used to set reminders in my phone to breathe, and they helped. I would get a reminder and I would just focus on my breath for a minute. We can use modern technology to help us be in the now or provide us with what we need if we're aware and willing to create boundaries around it, you know, so that we don't become inundated with what ultimately isn't really important.
Thank you so much, Asia. This has been so inspiring and helpful. And I know it's going to be very nourishing to all of our listeners and viewers. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And Casey, you know, you're inspiring. So I hope
Thank
that
you.
someone interviews you at some point for everything that you're creating, because, you know, you allow so much magic to come through so many people. So I just want you to know that I'm very appreciative to be part of your community. And I know a lot of people are going to be excited with everything else that you're bringing and offering to the world.
Oh, thank you so much, Asia. I appreciate that.